Hello, and welcome to our first episode of The Real Deal with Dee and Denice. I am Deidra Hubay, but my friends call me Dee.
And I am Denise, and people call me Denise.
On today's episode, we'll talk about what's the deal with the narrowly avoided government shutdown, what happened, who's responsible, and what's happening next. We've had a lot of big news this week. And then stay tuned for two takes and a fake and our deals of the week later on in the episode. All right, Denise, let's jump in. What is the deal with the shutdown?
The deal with the shutdown that I've noticed is, first of all, we got a Congress full of clowns. Let's establish that off the top, okay? You know, I'm having D. You're gonna have to help me with this because I'm having a hard time understanding how we keep sending people to sit in our government year after year, election cycle after election cycle, to represent us, to put our best interests up front, and they go in there and make a complete mess of everything. And if this week didn't show us that we need to pay strict attention to who we are supporting, nothing else will. I am embarrassed. I am humiliated in what I saw this week, and how not only did we come narrowly close to having a shutdown and having people's lives impacted negatively because we got a bunch of clowns and children running our government, but also, we saw the Speaker of the House lose his job because he sold his soul to the devil, literally. So the deal is that we need to put real people, better people, competent people in place to represent us. From my perspective, that's the deal. We got to do a better job of selecting our representatives and people who are supposed to represent us.
Denise, I could not agree more. And just to give our listeners a bit of a background for those who might not know, over the weekend, the Republican controlled House staved off an imminent government shutdown by leaning on Democrats to get the job done. And Denise, I'm going to ask you your thoughts on the matter, but please feel free to interject whenever you see fit. But do you have anything you'd like to add before I lay this out for our listeners?
I want you to go.
So every year, the government has to pass what's called an appropriations bill, which means they assign or appropriate government funds to various sectors and programs. And that kind of foreshadows the consequences on the economy and on our public services. So, for example, if the government were to shut down, Social Security checks would be held up, WIC, women, infants, and children, that wouldn't be going out, food stamps, museums would be closed, national parks would be closed. And you're probably asking why and how is it avoided? So, because of a bill has to originate in the House, McCarthy couldn't get his far right faction to agree on anything, even though the limits of this bill were already negotiated and agreed to back in June. So McCarthy was really afraid to put things forward because his really far right MAGA members said that they were not going to support anything, not even a short term continuing resolution bill. That did eventually get passed. But what a short term continuing resolution bill is just to keep the government open and kind of extend the fight that we're having. So they were able to get that. But now we have until November 17th. The fight is not over. So McCarthy was forced to rely on Democrats for the passage because the speaker's, like I said, right hand flank really just wanted to watch it all burn. Even in McCarthy's own words, he said, "I don't understand why anyone votes against bringing the idea to the floor and having a debate. This whole new concept of individuals just want to burn the whole place down." And burning the whole place down really seems to be the sentiment that I was getting from it, because as McCarthy and a lot of other prominent Republicans said, they were voting against one of the most conservative spending bills that had ever gone through the House, and they still voted against it. I don't really know why. We can assume Donald Trump might have something to do with that, but
Aha.
I guess we will see how that plays out. He's in court right now in New York trying to work through some of his indictments. So what happens next, though, is that we're really not through the storm yet. And before I talk about that, I just want to get your thoughts on what I've just spoke about, how they had to lean on Democrats to begin with to pass this continuing resolution.
And this is one thing that has always troubled me. We know that we've always had this two-party system, and they haven't
Mhm.
always gotten along. But the thing that bothers me most right now, Dee, is that where are the moderates? Where
Yeah.
are the moderates, especially in the Republican Party? Because the moderates would have, been a lot more quicker to just go ahead and say, let's do what we need to do to ensure that we do the people's business and be about the people's business. We would not let the clown show take
Mhm.
over. And this is what seems to continually is happening in the House of Representatives. The clown show continually takes over, and this is what is so problematic. And I don't see how this is going to change before November 17th. I'm scared to try to even look ahead to see where this clown car is headed, because now
The
we
road is a bit
know,
rocky.
yeah, it's a rocky road ahead. And we know that Donald Trump does have some bearing on this. He has some impact on this because for some reason he believes that if they were to shut down the government, it would stop these cases against him. It would shut down the DOJ. It would shut down the special prosecutor, and he would be able to ride off into the sunset and not be held accountable for these crimes that he's committed.
Exactly. And I think something for the Republicans to really think about is that they only control one house of government. Um, so you can only do so much when you only control one house. And it's politics, baby. Nobody gets everything they want. And this hard right faction just kept saying, unless we get absolutely everything that we're asking for, we're not going to pass anything at all, which is just so bad for the country, including their own constituents. So it just makes no sense to me. Like, are you there to govern, or are you there for, I don't know, just this clown show, like you say? And you mentioned, like, where are the moderates? I think they're quite few and far between these days. But I think with the continuing resolution bill that was passed, that's kind of where we saw our moderates come in. You had some moderates from both sides that kind of came together and was like, okay, it's really important that we get this bill passed for the American people. So if I have to reach across the aisle and do some bipartisan work, which, by the way, is important and integral part of governing at all, because you don't want a country that's controlled by just one faction, regardless
Absolutely.
of who is in charge. There's still half of your country that may feel differently. So I think, it's hard to make compromises, but I think it's an important part of governing, and it's something that you have to
Absolutely.
know, right, that you have to be prepared for if you want to run for office.
And if I might add one other thing to that too, you know, people got upset. There were people who got upset. Even some Democrats got upset with Democrats for not saving, so to speak, the Speaker of the House.
McCarthy, yeah.
They have to understand what happened here, because at first I was a little confused by that too. But it's what he did. He really is a snake. Because he ran to Newsmax and he did some of these interviews where he just completely threw the Democrats under the bus after they helped to save and keep us from the shutdown. He went and threw the Democrats all the way under the bus, and in fact, he blamed the Democrats for what was happening. And so
Absolutely.
that was a head scratcher right there. So
And then he
why
thought they
would
would
he
help.
think? Right. Why would he think they would save him after that? So it made no sense. And then we find out little man from North Carolina, because that's where I am, Patrick McHenry, who has taken over, who's just a little placeholder actually for Speaker of the House. The first order of business
It's
was to kick
important.
Nancy Pelosi out of her little, secret office while
While she
she's
was at a
mourning.
funeral.
She's at a funeral. Oh my God. And they kicked out Steny Hoyer as well. But that's petty stuff. And this is how they're governing these days. Everything is governed in revenge politics or whatever. It is just so infuriating to me that they are just not capable of governing anymore. It's just all it's childish. And I am really just furious with what I see going on in Washington, D.C. right now. I'm just absolutely furious.
I think you have every right to be. I think all the American people, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, should be furious. These are people that are supposed to be representing us. They work for us. We pay them. It's our money, and this is what they're doing up there. There's all kinds of issues that need attention, and they're having this kind of fight, ousting their own speaker. So, you know what? We're going to come back to that. I'm just going to give a little bit more background for our listeners. So, like we mentioned, when they passed the continuing resolution, they had about 45 days, and that deadline is November 17th, and it's quickly approaching. And like you
Yes.
just mentioned, McCarthy was, in fact, ousted from his speakership on Tuesday, which has never, ever, 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 not once happened in the history of the United States. So it's interesting. Right before it let up, I think McCarthy says that he knew this was coming, but the day before this happened, he said, if somebody wants to bring a motion against me, bring it. There has to be an adult in the room. I'm going to govern with what's best for this country. And he said, if you want to throw a motion and vacate, that's fine. I didn't survive 15 rounds of voting, and I'll survive another 15 rounds, which is a historic thing on its own. It has never taken 15 rounds of voting for somebody to become elected for the Speaker of the House, which kind of just highlights how weak he was coming into that position to begin with, especially with all the
Absolutely.
concessions he had to make. I see that he is now blaming Democrats for the rule that he agreed to. Where it only took one person to bring the motion to vacate. However, on Tuesday, in the historic move, McCarthy was actually ousted as the speaker, and it was led by his heart-right faction of Matt Gaetz. And 8 Republicans joined in with all 208 Democrats who unanimously voted also against Kevin McCarthy. However, as Kevin McCarthy and other Republicans have said, of course you can count on the Democrats to vote against them. He's not a part of their party, and of course they would prefer to have somebody else as speaker. And he's lying to his own faction. He's lying to the Democrats. He's making promises left, right, and center and keeping none of them, and then wondering why he's not able to build a coalition. So, in other words, hard right Republicans voted with Democrats to oust McCarthy because McCarthy voted with Democrats. So, that's a very interesting dynamic there. They only needed 214 votes because of everyone that was present in order for McCarthy to stay, and he came up short. The vote was 216 to oust and 210 to keep. As McCarthy pointed out, that means that 96% of his own faction wanted to keep him, and he was really upset that, in his words, 4% of the faction could make or break the entire Republican speakership. And I have a hard time finding sympathy when he really
Yes.
set himself up for this to begin with,
Yes. Yes.
especially with how you said he went on this Sunday show and he talked all of this crap about Democrats. Of course, I mean, really, you've already lied to them. You've already not kept your promises. They already bailed you out once. You're not grateful for it. And then you want to turn around and expect them to save you? That's not on the Democrats. That's on your faction to figure out. I don't really know
Absolutely.
what's going on with that conference, but again, not our clown, not our circus. That's what I like to say.
Absolutely. And first of all, for you to want power so bad that you agree to the nonsense that one person could get you
Right.
kicked out. And then 15 rounds. I mean, I think by the time it hit 3 or 4, I would have been like, look, these people don't really want me. I don't know if I want to keep putting myself through this humiliation. That's
Right.
what normal people would have done. You sat there and let yourself go through 15 rounds. You wanted that power, that your thirst for power was so huge that you put yourself through that humiliation because it had to be humiliation because it had never happened before in the first place. And so, I mean, I've just never seen anything like this ever. And I've never seen anything like this. And it just seems like there are no standards anymore. And
Mm.
and mentioning the aforementioned Matt Gaetz,
Oh my
who's
goodness.
also getting a little dose of his own medicine right now, because the Republicans who were supporting the former Speaker of the House are now digging up the dirt on Matt Gaetz as payback.
And there is a lot of dirt there. Okay.
He's a dirty little
Even
boy, and I'm
sure
loving
is.
this.
McCarthy said that Matt Gaetz and people like him should not be considered conservatives because they're not. So you know, I don't know. The Democrats were clearly very unified. Every single present Democrat voted the same exact way. And then the entire, you say, clown show was just taken over between infighting on the Republican side, who are supposed to run this body of government right now. And not to mention, again, right now we're operating under the extended continuing resolution. That deadline is November 17th. And what did they do? They took a week's recess, an entire week, to determine who might be the next speaker. And as we
Oh, and the
already saw,
names. Have you heard some of the
oh,
names that are being thrown around for that?
yeah, I saw Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan have both announced, and I think there's other names floating around, but those are the two who have outright said I'm going to be vying for this position, which I've got a lot of thoughts on that. So we're going to be returning. I just wanted to
Okay.
point out that it's going to be another clown show. It took McCarthy 15 rounds. I don't think it's going to take the next person any less rounds. I mean, maybe by a few, but nobody has changed their position. The hardliners are still in the same place they were when they couldn't get McCarthy passed, and the entire rest of the Republican conference is still on the other side.
It's going to
McCarthy,
be interesting.
he has the shortest speakership in more than 140 years,
They are
serving
steady. They are steady making history.
making history. 15 rounds, only 269 days as
Isn't it
speaker. I
beautiful?
mean, and nobody has been ousted from the speakership by by the conference, let alone by their own party. I mean, it's just bizarre. John Boehner was the last person who this may have come up for, and he had the decency to resign and step aside so that he didn't put the institution through this clown show.
Oh
But
boy,
here
this
we
is
are.
good. Here we are. But now there is a third name that's floating around pretty
Oh,
heavily out there.
hit me with it.
The Orange Menace.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, like we said, Steve Scalise, Jim Jordan, they've announced there's some others floating around, but you do not actually have to be a Congress member
Nope.
to be elected Speaker of the House.
You can come
And
off the street
MTG types. Yeah, right. And MTG types, that's Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're pushing for Donald Trump.
with Donald
Yep.
Trump.
Yep, you heard that right.
And when I saw that, I said some words that I probably need to go and do a confession and repent because I said a lot of ugly words.
And I mean, speaking of this right now, don't you think Donald Trump's maybe just a little bit busy
I think
considering
it's
this?
yeah,
Yeah,
sure,
this
sure,
entire week, he's actually been in court in the
yeah,
$250 million New York civil fraud case and just
absolutely.
got a gag order
Yeah,
entered yesterday.
he's a little busy. He's a little busy. Yeah. Hey, I think that he can't. 4 court cases, 91 federal charges. I think that, and plus, from what I understand, according to the Republicans' own rules for Speaker of the House, I think he's disqualified anyway because he got federal indictments. So I don't think that'll work.
Absolutely should be. Yesterday, it was reported that he was moaning and groaning and smacking on the table and pounding his fist during the court
Because there
procession.
was no jury.
Yeah. Which, by the way, the reason that there's no jury isn't because he wasn't given one. It's because his lawyers did not do their job and said that they did not want a jury.
I love
So
it.
that is
I
100% on
love it.
him and the people that are around him.
I love it. I love it. But what gets me when they were in during break time, he run to a camera and Alina Habba was stand there, and while he's talking about only in America and we're not afforded the opportunity to have a jury, and she's standing there looking like the cat that swallowed the bird. Like, girl, you're the reason you don't have a jury. The judge told you that. And I'm like, oh boy, this is good stuff to me. Your whole team is incompetent.
And I'm just concerned at any woman that wants to work for Donald Trump anyway. Oh, you want to go work for the grab him by the pussy guy? You think
Right,
that's you think he has respect for you? You think he
right,
gives a shit? I mean, excuse
right.
my language.
No, but you're absolutely right. How can any woman do that? He has no respect for her anyway. Nobody else
Yeah,
wants to
right.
work for him. And the one lawyer that he has made him prepay because he don't pay his bills.
Right. And
Okay.
that's a continuing problem. I'm like, have they learned nothing? Have they
No,
learned nothing? I
no,
mean, really.
no.
Um,
They have not.
like, okay, for example, when January 6th happened, we can look at McCarthy since he's our topic of today's
Hmm,
conversation. And
good
he
point.
was like, this is completely wrong. Donald Trump had a hand to play in this. This is, he was really against it. And then like it felt like the next day he was kissing the shoes of Donald Trump down in Mar-a-Lago. Trump has created a base who I don't think that they are conservative Republicans in the way that we have typically thought about them
No,
now. And
no.
I think a lot of them were previously non-voters. So I think he's re-energized a new base. And now this voting bloc exists and they don't see a pathway to success and to keep their job without being on the side of Donald Trump because I don't think that they think they can win a Republican election, in the primary, and then get a vote from the Republican base unless they support Trump because of how much the base has moved. And yeah, it's scary times, and that's how we get like Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Matt Gaetzes, and so I don't really know where we're gonna go from here, but
That base is scary. I've seen where oftentimes they have these reporters that would be outside of a Trump rally and they will, oh my God, interview some of these people and try to find out why are you in, support still in such strong support of him when he has all these federal charges and indictments and so on and so forth. And they'll say he's still the president. I'm like, have y'all heard your dude? Can we make two countries already and just let him take his people and just go? And just go.
on one
Please.
hand, I want to just like shove them all to this island in the middle of nowhere, but at the same time, like, you're not going to take half my country. This is my country, and I'm not about to let you guys flush it down the toilet with your clown show, okay? We didn't serve in the military to have you guys come in here
Yeah,
and disrespect the Constitution,
that's
disrespect the
it.
rule of law, disrespect order, disrespect the institutions, our military members. I mean, it's just obscene.
Oh, I got into it with this lady on TikTok the other. She was talking about Donald Trump, and I said what I had to say, and she was like, "Let me tell you something. I am a patriot, and he is a real patriot." And I was like, "Lady, let me tell you what a patriot is." And I got to tell her about what I did over in South Korea, right on the DMZ. You want to know what a patriot is? You want me to tell you why I constantly have to go over to the VA and get these shots in my neck and shoulder? You want to know what a patriot is? And she had to shut her old mouth. I tell you that. Let me say this real quick. There are words that they have hijacked that I cannot tolerate
Absolutely.
anymore. They have hijacked the word patriot. They have
Hmm.
hijacked the word veteran. They have hijacked the word Christian
They've hijacked
because
the flag.
the flag,
Yeah.
the guns, all of those things. When I see it now, if I see a Bible, a gun, or flag, right away I'm looking at not a conservative, not a Republican. I'm looking at an extreme nutcase
Yeah, it's
because
scary.
that's usually what it is. Most of those people who display those things are not normal people. These are the extreme, the fringes. You know what I mean? Because and then they say, well, you're supporters of the Democrats or supporters of whoever. We never see you. You're not popular because you're not. We don't see you with your T-shirts and your hat. I don't need to. I do what I need to do in the voting booth. I don't have to put nobody's face on my clothes or fly any flags. I go in the voting booth and do what I need to do. But it's the fringes. But they have, like you said, the flag. If I was to put a United States flag today on my vehicle, right away people would assume that I'm some wild, crazy conservative or, extreme Republican. And,
Absolutely.
that,
And
and
it's
that's what has
sad
happened.
because like I want the flag back. I want to take the flag back. Why should they get to have it? But unfortunately, I'm not going to display. I used to have a flag outside. And you know what I replaced it with? It's one of those flags that says like in this house we believe, you know, kindness over everything, women's rights are humans' rights, all that kind of stuff because I was like I'm not going to be. I love this country. I stand for the Constitution. I served it, but I'm not going to be lumped in with these people who feel so blatantly in opposition to all of the things that I thought the flag was supposed to stand for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's
Yeah.
sad that, and this is where the division, our country is so bitterly divided that it's really scary and it's unfair. It's unfair because we stereotyping each other. We're putting each other into groups, and we don't know if people really are like that. But this is what we see, and
Yeah, and
it's
that makes it harder for us to connect with people and it draws a more divisive line. But at the same time, I understand why we do it because we've seen how people like Mitt Romney just came out about how he had to spend, what was it, $5,000 a day on personal security because he
yes,
was afraid for him and his
yes,
family. And he's
yes,
a Republican.
yes.
I
Well,
mean,
look at these prosecutors and the judges that are having to beef up security because of Donald Trump.
mm,
Because all he has to do is say a word or two, and his supporters go crazy, and they
right.
start going after these people and making threats to these people. And if they and given the chance, I believe they would act on these threats if they had the opportunity to do it. Fonnie Willis or Judge Tanya Chuckin or whether
Pelosi's
any of
husband.
them. Yes,
I mean, it's things have actually happened. It's not, oh, they probably will. They actually have done it.
and they
They have
have done it.
actually done it. And, and it's not just Nancy Pelosi's. What they caught that Democratic office on fire.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, like, it's a really scary thing. I would call it domestic terrorism.
It is absolutely domestic terrorism. Well, you remember the 80-something-year-old man that had all the ammunition and the guns that was threatening President Biden after
Mm,
Donald Trump said something on TV, and then the man that went to the Obama's home in D.C. after something. All he has to do is come out and say something like, "This country's not going to stand for it. We're going to fight against this." That every time he comes out and says something like that, something happens, and it's like, my thing is this: there is a line when it comes to free speech. Free
yeah,
speech should not be
it
so
doesn't.
inclusive of everything.
It's
There
like
has to be a
everything
line
else.
drawn. You can't
Right,
shouldn't be able to say anything you want at any given time, because
right,
if it can bring harm to another person, that is not free speech.
right.
That's danger.
Right. And I have rights. I have rights because I am an American citizen living under the Constitution too. So your rights only extend as far as they can until they infringe on mine. And now, if
Absolutely,
you are infringing on my rights that I am guaranteed, that is no longer something you have the right to do because I am
absolutely,
guaranteed and afforded these rights by the Constitution and you are inhibiting them. So,
absolutely.
like, if you are hurting somebody else or causing mass hysteria, like, you can't yell fire in the middle of a theater if there's no fire because it causes mass panic. That's not free speech. You
That
can't
is not
just
free
say whatever
speech.
you want and then have no consequence for things. You are allowed to say things, but there are
But there
consequences.
are consequences. I mean, and then I think that I know a lot of what he's getting away with is because he's a former president, but they're at some point they're going to have to look beyond that too, because he's putting too many people's lives in danger here, because they keep threatening gag order. Now this recent judge put a partial gag order on
Yeah.
him, but what does he do? Walk right out of the courtroom and go right out there and violate it every time.
Well, to be
Every
fair,
time.
so yeah, that's perfect circle back because I was just about to do the same thing because I don't want everyone to forget that this week and for a lot more of the upcoming weeks, Trump is in court. And for this one, it's the $250 million New York civil fraud case. And he got the gag order because he attacked in one of his campaign emails the aide to the judge and said some really gross things about her, and then the judge was like, okay, you cannot do this. That is completely not okay. This is just a civil servant who has no bearing on this case whatsoever and should not be subjected to your attacks. And when they put the gag order out, it's really against Trump. However, it's for quote unquote all parties involved. And it only applies to his staff because the judge was like, this is my position. I'm the judge. I don't suggest that you say things about me, but he didn't put a gag order on talking about the judge, but he put it on all of his staff that are involved, and for good reason. Returning to all of the danger, even the person who is for sure definitely a Republican, who was at the January 6th Capitol riot, who was like one of the first people to bust through the barricades. The Republicans have now framed him as a I don't even really know what they mean. An undercover, like Antifa, deep state Democrat who was never really a Republican.
I don't
And he has been getting death threats. So, like, they're even willing to go against their own people. So, I think it's a very credible threat. And of course, the gag order should have been put in place. But if this was anybody else, there wouldn't be a gag order. You would be going to jail, probably getting
Yes.
pretrial detention.
Absolutely.
So,
If it was anyone else, and he pushes, he keeps pushing it because it's to me he's begging them to do something. Like he's saying,
mm,
"I'm untouchable. I want to see how far I can get to see if you really do something," and they're not. And I think for two reasons. I think they're afraid of the backlash from his base and his supporters, especially the violent ones. And secondly, because of who he was. But that's just it, who he was. He is
right.
not currently occupying an office. He is a civilian like the rest of us at this point. And if he's putting people's lives in jeopardy, his role as a former president should not come into play because he is jeopardizing all of us at this point. Because right now he's only
Yeah.
concerned about himself, saving himself from prison, and he's willing to burn the whole country down to save himself. And this is just not fair. Letitia James, Judge Chuckin, Alvin Bragg,
Warren.
anybody that's bringing up anything that has anything to do with these charges against him, he's willing to bring harm to them, and that's not right.
Absolutely. Like he said, what was the exact quote? I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and get away with it
And
in
we
broad
didn't know
daylight.
how true that really was at the
Right.
time. You
And we're
know what I
seeing
mean?
it. Yep.
And now we're seeing it play out in real time. And it's crazy. And the thing that really gets me deep with this is that when you look at his base, his supporters, though, at least those who come out to his rallies, most of these people are upper middle age to elderly, and a lot of them are probably on a fixed income. So if the Republicans have their way in these budget battles, and they actually cut Medicare and Social Security and disability and all these things,
Which,
guess
make no
who's going
mistake,
to
they
be
are
harmed
trying
the
to do.
most? The biggest part of his base will be affected the most. And
Yep.
they're the ones that are sending him their money, and they're the ones that are running to his rallies. And I often sit and shake my head and say, but you cannot convince them that he's not a good guy. You
Right,
can't
they
convince
cut off
them.
their nose to spite their own face. If you look back to the 2020 election, they were like, "Oh, well, how come like so many more Democrats voted by mail? How come a bunch of Republicans didn't participate in the voting by mail?" Well, gee, I wonder because you spent this entire time leading up to the election saying how corrupt, quote unquote, mail-in ballots were, attacking the USPS, the United States Postal Service, which is in the Constitution, trying to privatize it. I mean, of course they didn't vote because you made them distrust voting by mail. And voting by mail breaks down a bunch of barriers for people, especially if you're elderly and maybe you're not mobile. So it would have been great to be able to vote from the leisure of your home. And so when those kind of results happen, you can't be surprised. But then he turns around and says, "Oh, it's Democrats' fault and it's rigged. And I don't know why this would have happened." And just takes
Boy, with
no responsibility.
that was so effective to talk about how bad vote by mail is. When COVID hit, it was so great to have the mail-in ballots because you didn't have to stand in these long lines with people coughing on each other,
Right.
right? COVID was out of control at that time, and yeah, and it did benefit the Democrats the most because Democrats are the ones that would do mail-in ballots more so than Republicans. Republicans are more of same-day voters than they are mail-in. But the thing that gets me is that now that thing was so effective to just tarnish mail-in voting and all the things that have been so effective for people. And this guy comes along and just shreds the notion that it and just makes it out to be such a bad thing, and people buying into it like, how? How did you let this man sell you this bill of goods? I don't get it. I don't
Yeah,
get it.
and just destroyed institutional norms, the idea of decorum. Like, I mean, and it's this fake populism. Like, I would love to have someone who's really caring about the actual working class Americans that are the heart and soul, the veins of this country, keeping it together, keeping it running. But he is not that. And how he was able to convince people that he's not an elite, that he just got a small loan of $1 million and that makes him just like the rest of us is so far beyond me. I don't even know where to begin with that.
Well, he pretty much tells, what he did for them was like, don't hide it. Come out in the open. Let people know your reasons. Don't try to hide it. And this is what they appreciated so much about him. And he is like, do not stand in the shadows or be afraid of consequences. Just be daring. And I'm like, wow, that was effective too, because now people, I mean, they've come all out and just say it. The white supremacists, they come out, the KKK, the whole thing in Charlottesville. I mean, just because he comes out and says both sides. The
Right.
neo-Nazis,
There is no
it
both
wasn't so bad.
sides when we're talking about Nazis. Okay.
Yeah, Nazis are not
Neo-Nazis,
that
there is no
bad.
both sides. They killed someone that day.
Right. Nazis are not so bad. These people are not so bad, and this is not so bad. And now, and these dictators and tyrants and despots, he aspires to be like them. He wants to be like them. If it had people groveling at his feet and like they do for Putin and Kim Jong Un in North Korea, he wants that.
And
He
the
wants that.
people at Charlottesville were literally screaming with their pitchforks and fire, "The Jews will
Jews
not
will not
replace us."
replace
That
us.
is disgusting. That is
Mhm.
like really seriously Nazis, and they were proud of it. And both sides? No,
Both
there is no
sides.
both sides to that. You know what I mean? There is
Both
no both
sides.
sides.
Really, seriously. This is the
Yeah.
person that you all want to bring back. Can you imagine what that would look like? But just and both of us are military veterans, and we know what he said
Mhm.
about General Milley.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
And
god. Yeah.
General Milley, answered that, and all the things that he said about our military people. This is why I don't
You wanna
understand the
tell our
military.
listeners what he said about Mark Milley?
But he pretty much said that General Milley should have been killed for treason
Yeah.
during his time.
Hanged is
He
his
should have
words
been
that
hanged.
he used. It
Hmm.
was the words about someone who has served our country faithfully, put their life on the line, decades and decades of service to the United States, and he just frivolously called basically for their death,
Hmm.
which is
A
not the first
four-star
time.
general. But I just wanted to just plug that in there with, like I
Yeah,
said, with both of us being military veterans. But look, that's how he has treated our military personnel and our veterans, particularly,
right.
suckers and losers and all of this stuff. And we still have military people backing him. And that right there, I can never grasp that concept, how they could be supporting him. But
And he wants to tout how he did a bunch for military members, but military members saw the lowest raises that they had in decades when
oh
Trump
yeah.
was in office. Obama gave them way more, but he wants to pretend that he's doing so much more than anyone else for veterans. Like, does he think we're stupid? That's another thing that I would like because that's its own issue too. Like you're talking about your military members that are fighting for you, for this constitution, and for the rest of the American people. And that's how you're talking about us. That's how you're thinking about us. Why would you do that?
I'll never understand it. My hope is that we just get enough people out to vote next year, or he'll just be found ineligible to even get on the ballot. He just cannot become president again under any circumstance.
I could not agree more, but we can only hope. I guess we'll see how this is playing out. I'm very hopeful that Biden will be able to secure a win, but it's not going to be without a fight, and it's not something that we can be complacent about. And
Absolutely.
I look forward to talking about that with you on our podcast next week.
Yes, yes, yes.
Um, so to circle us back, so far I've talked about the shutdown, who was responsible, what happened, where we were going from here. And then we talked a little bit about what was up with some other Republican news, what the deal was there, Trump's court case. And so to close this little segment out, I will end with a quote from John Fetterman, which has a little bit of explicit words, I guess. So bear with me. But John Fetterman, who is a senator from Pennsylvania, was speaking about McCarthy being ousted and kind of speaking to the disarray that has been left in his place as they look for a new speaker to replace him. And he said, replacing one dick with a different kind of dick isn't going to change anything in the House. We're one DNA test away from the Jerry Springer show.
I love that
So
quote.
that's the state of American politics today. But all right, Denise, to keep with this lightheartedness that we've got going on now after such a heavy conversation, I'm going to give you 3 quotes from the second Republican debate last Wednesday on September 27th. It
Okay.
feels like that was ages ago, considering the really hot news cycle we've had since, but it was actually only 8 days ago, last Wednesday.
Okay.
2 of these quotes will be real, and one of them will be fake. I made it up. So your job is to identify the the fake from the takes.
Okay.
So, are you ready?
I think so.
Okay. Our first quote, our country's education system is in decline because it's focused on indoctrination. 2. In these challenging times, we should stand united to defend our Constitution and our American values of freedom. 3. I have been discriminated against, but America is not a racist country. Never ever doubt who we are. We are the greatest country on God's green earth.
I know that was true.
So then, yeah, you've got a 50-50. If you want me to read you those 2 again, I can.
Okay.
All right. So, okay, the ones that we're between for this 50-50 chance. Our country's education system is in decline because it's focused on indoctrination. Or, in these challenging times, we should stand united to defend our Constitution and our American values of freedom. Which one is the
Which one?
fake? Tell me your thought process. What are you going through?
Dun, dun, dun. I'm gonna go with in these challenging times. We
We
should
should
stand
stand
united.
united to defend our Constitution and our American values of freedom. I think that was a really good guess, Denise. What made you pick that as our fake for this week?
I chose that one because that one about indoctrination is something that they talk about all the time, every day, ad nauseum, until I want to throw up.
Which is
So,
quite bizarre. So we'll return to that in a second. But you are right. I made that one up. I'm actually unable to identify a Republican who is willing to stand united to defend our Constitution at this time. But I thought throwing in the American values of freedom might help to throw you off because that is another word that they hijacked. But who do you think said our country's education system is in decline because it's focused on indoctrination?
out of the ones that was on that stage.
Out of the ones that were on the stage, yeah. So you've got Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, Doug Burgum, Chris Christie, and I think I might be missing some.
I'm going to take a stab at it and say that was probably Mr. DeSantis.
You are correct. Mr. DeSantis, the Don't Say Gay book banner. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Is the one saying that our education system is in decline because it's focused on indoctrination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because down there in Florida, everything is woke, 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 indoctrination, woke,
Mm.
woke, 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 woke. Yeah, that's all they talk
Meanwhile,
about.
they want to show PragerU videos in their school systems. So I'm a bit confused on who's doing the indoctrinating, but
And it's crazy. They got a 9,000 teacher shortage in Florida. Teachers are leaving in droves. They're sick and tired of the bull crap that's going on down there, but they're still talking nonsense like that. I'm if I had children in the school system young enough to be in school down there, I swear they'd be homeschooled. I would actually let the TV teach my kids before I let any. I just don't know how our
You know,
children are going to get a good education
I
anymore.
completely agree. But I was talking to my mom about this and I was like, I think I would have to homeschool if I had kids and that was what they were going to be being taught because I'll be damned if they're going to come home with all this misinformation thinking that
Right,
it's true because they're
right,
learning it from someone they are supposed to trust.
right.
And my mom was like, but why should they get to win and take over our American school system? She was like, what I would do is I would go down there and I would talk to all of their teachers. I'd call a meeting with the principal. I'd write notes and I'd say that you're not allowed to see any PragerU video because it's not backed in science and evidence. And I would have them give you other things to do because I don't think that you should be taken away from being able to socialize and be a part of all the other things that education gives kids outside of the classroom. And I was like, I think that's a really good point, but I just don't know where to stand on the issue. So something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, and the book banning and the book burning. One of
Mhm.
my favorite books, Lee Harper's To Kill a Mockingbird. I've read the book. I've seen the play. They can't even read books like that anymore. It should be a parent, just like you want parents to be involved in the educational process in general. Why can't parents get to choose what their kids can read? You won't even let parents, have a say on what their
Mhm.
children can read. I just think everything is just going crazy these days, and
When
I just hate it.
I agree. When I was in high school, I read of Mice and Men and To Kill a Mockingbird, and I think that they were incredibly powerful, and I think they were an important part of our learning, and I think a lot of
Yes,
people in the class got something out of it. So for that to
absolutely.
be banned is just, it's so grotesque in and of itself. And then on top of it, this is the same party who is telling us parents' rights, states' rights, parents should be in charge. That's not putting parents in charge of what they get to learn. So, really, what you're saying is that's not true. You don't believe that. You just hate gay and transgender people.
Absolutely. It's all about hate. And no
Right.
matter how you look at it, it's all about hate. This is what gets me about the Republican Party. You're worried about the LGBTQ. You're worried about these people minding their own business, hurting nobody
Right.
every day. And it just drives me nuts. Their hypocrisy is insane. And
The
it's
hypocrisy, the cognitive I just wow. And that's what's really concerning to me just in general. Like, I don't know if it's the fact that we just don't have enough information literacy. I know we don't have mandated civics classes in school. Most Americans can't even tell you the three branches of government.
ooh.
I mean, it's like, what are we doing?
Now that's troublesome right there because that's why a lot of people don't know that President Biden, in and of himself, cannot forgive student debt. Do you understand that they have to be in coordination with the House? With it all works together. He can't. He don't have his magic wand and say, "Okay, student loan is forgiven." He can't do it
Right.
by himself.
The executive branch, aka the presidency, has nothing to do with legislating and writing laws. They originate in the House, they go to the Senate, where then they get passed, and then after it makes it through all of that, it will go to the president's desk for a
For
yay
his
or a nay.
signature,
And even if he nays it, the Senate can overturn it with a
overturn.
supermajority, which almost never happens. So
Don't
for
get it.
people to blame the presidency is just bonkers.
They don't get it. This is why we do need to bring back civics class because they don't understand how government works. They don't understand that the Constitution, there are certain things that spelled out in the Constitution, and you can't just go around the Constitution and
Right.
just omit the Constitution and just do your own thing.
Ugh.
But anyway, I digress. It is this,
Yeah.
we're just living in a weird time. But overall, this conversation, this is just so good. It gives me a chance to get it out because all week
Yeah.
long, I read this stuff and I sit and it's just like henny penny goosey loosey turkey lurkey. The sky is falling every
Yeah.
day.
It's like
It's
just to
falling.
give give you like a quick anecdote. My boyfriend is from England and we live together now. And he like, he thought Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, who's their PM now, he thinks all of them are bad. And he thinks that's a clown show. But then he's sitting here listening to American politics, and he is really just taken aback by what's going on in American politics. So it's not just us that we're embarrassed. Like,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
are an embarrassment on the world stage, and people
yeah.
used to look up to us, and they're not going to be doing that
And that's
anymore.
that, and that if anything, that is a horrifying thought because
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
friends that live in other countries that have said to me, Denise, what is going on in the United States? The United States was like the big brother of all nations that you looked up to, you wanted to model after, that was that one that set the standard for everything you
Yeah.
aspired to be like. They're like, what the hell are y'all doing over there? Especially with all of the hate and the racism, and more so
And
than
it's going to
that,
create a power vacuum because
the
somebody has to fill the
shootings.
spot.
That's right. The shootings, because I've had people say I refuse to step foot in America again, until y'all do something about this all these killings, the shootings every single day, especially with the children, the school shootings. The face of America right now is not very good. Like, we have to be real that
Yeah.
that is the consensus of a lot of people because it's all over the news every day. We have no safe space. I don't care whether it's a church, a school, hospitals, funeral homes, grocery stores. There is no safe space anymore. Nowhere.
I think that we've just identified an episode that we might want to dive into and talk about what's the deal with guns.
Absolutely. What's the deal with guns? Somebody's going to have to do something. I think even Republicans now are starting to see how this gun culture is really starting to affect the country very negatively. It's
Yeah,
affecting our tourism.
I
Florida's
know.
tourism has taken a huge hit, not because of violence so much. That's part of it. But the stuff that DeSantis has done has definitely affected Florida's
He's
tourism.
fighting with Disney. What grown man fights with Disney? Who fights with Disney in general?
And the mouse
Disney.
wins.
And not to mention that Disney is also the number one employer of people in his state.
In his state. Absolutely.
But he cares about them. No. I mean, really.
How
Right.
much arrogance does it take and delusion
Yeah.
to be such a person?
I'll just leave that to our listeners' imaginations. Okay. So before we move on to our deals of the week, I did want to get your opinion, your thoughts about Tim Scott's quote from the Republican debate. I'll read it again for you. I have been discriminated against, but America is not a racist country. Never ever doubt who we are. We are the greatest country on God's green earth. And I'll just say the first part again. I have been discriminated against, but America is not a racist country. Tim Scott, Black congressman from South Carolina.
I think Tim Scott fell and bumped his head, is what I think. And he wants to become president so bad that he's willing to make a fool of himself to do that. How can any black person, any person of color with one functioning brain cell make such a statement? We have had people brought to this country against their will, lynched, set on fire, beaten to death. And I'm not just talking about these hundreds of years ago, during slavery and what happened during the Jim Crow era. We don't even have to talk about that with the voting rights and the civil rights era and all those things. Let's talk about today, the things that are still going on. The police brutality. When you look at the number, how you can take a person of color and you can take a white person committing the same crime and look to see who gets the most time. Okay. You can go on the Department of Justice website right now and look at stats and will prove all of what I'm saying right now. But this is not a racist country. We see it in everything. We see it in everything across the board that Black people, particularly, are still at the bottom of everything due to institutionalized racism. That is a given. It's the truth. It's not just us crying racism every single day. It's proven fact. And he stands there when he said that mess that time. It just angered me because that doesn't help anybody. If we're going to do anything about this stuff, we have to be truthful and honest about what's in front of us. We can't keep telling this lie. America is a racist country. And I served this country. But I would never stand flat-footed and say there's no racism here. It still remains. It's
And it's
institutional.
embedded. It's embedded.
And I was just
Exactly
going
like
to
you
say
said.
that.
It's institutionalized. It's embedded.
Absolutely across the board. In hiring practices, is still there.
Yep.
In almost everything
it is
we
a
do.
fact that job applications that have quote unquote African American sounding names are less likely to receive a callback for interview than a traditional white sounding.
Yes. Let me tell you something I saw not long ago. There was a Black family that was selling a home, and they had people coming to look at this house, but when they realized that it was a house that belonged to a black family, the offer was very low, okay, for what they were willing to pay for this house. But then I think, someone suggested to them to take down anything that would give any indication as to the race of the people that were selling the house. And then all of a sudden, the offer shot up thousands and thousands of dollars more when they couldn't connect the race of the people who were selling the house. And you tell me that this is still not a racist country? Tim Scott needs to worry about this instead of telling that lie about not racism. I'll tell you what he needs to be worried about. Republicans are dismissing him because the very fact that he's still so low down on the totem pole, one is because he's Black in this race.
But he wouldn't see them.
Okay, so yeah. Well, the thing is too, in order for him as a conservative, it ain't gonna happen because the
No, but he
Republicans
chose to use his time fighting over curtains with Nikki Haley during the debate.
Thank you.
Of all things, I mean,
of all things, curtains. Thank you for that. See, that ought to tell you something right there, because that's part of his problem. He's just such a weirdo, to be honest with you. But no, I really reject his notion that America is not a racist country, because it is. America that got to confront that demon of racism, and they're not willing to. And he knows that he's getting nowhere as a Black Republican, nowhere near the White House as a Black Republican.
and I don't understand why he is happy and okay with the tokenism. They don't like him because he's got great ideas. They like him because he's an African American who's on their side, and they just want to point to him and be like, look, we have people that are over here that support us too. And they just use him. And
that's right.
It's just gross to me. And I don't know.
You know what? You don't even have to choose your words that carefully, Dee, because what you're saying is true. Because they want to be able to point to him and say, see, we got Black people on our side. This Black man don't even know he Black. I don't know what he see when he look in the mirror, and I just don't get it, because any Black person that can say there's still not racism, please go and look at stats. You can look at
he did say he was discriminated against, even though there is quote unquote no racism. It is not a racist country.
If you've been discriminated against, then that's racism, Tim Scott.
Listen to yourself.
You're talking out of both sides of your mouth. Okay, even right now, if a police officer pulls up behind me at a light, my credentials are always going to be straight. My tags, my license, my insurance, they could run anything on me and it's squeaky clean. So I'm never concerned on that front. but I'm concerned because I got a black face. So how can he say that with a straight face? That's why he going
Especially
back to.
as someone who can experience it themselves. It's just,
So he claimed. So he claimed. The George Floyd policing act went nowhere in the Senate.
right. And
It went nowhere.
and that's despicable. This is a giant problem, and you still didn't do anything about it. But yet
Nothing.
people are still dying, and it's not even the cops are killing them, and so are just random white people.
But
Not
yeah,
to
but Tim
mention a
Scott
life
says there's no
is priceless. So
there's no racism in America, according to Tim Scott. There's no racism in America. I'd have been on that stage and I could have came up with several cases and I would have shut Gummy down.
right, and not a single person on that stage, because of course not, had anything to say.
And
Nobody refuted it. Nope.
Nikki Haley, I never cared a lot for her, but I found some respect for her during the Charleston thing. The
The
Emmanuel
Charlottesville.
Church thing, yeah, the
Oh,
shooting.
oh, okay,
When
yeah.
the 9 people got killed in church, because I
Dylan Roof,
thought at that time, Dylan Roof, yeah, I thought
murderer.
that she did the right thing with the Confederate flags. But then she turned another corner after that. And she became this Donald Trump bootlicker. And I
I'm
couldn't
sick of the
understand that.
pandering.
But no, to answer your original question, Tim Scott he's a lost cause.
As most of them seem to be, unfortunately. Okay. Well, we tried to move from a deep conversation, a heavy one, into some lighthearted stuff, but we ended up right back in heavy because that's really just the state of American politics today. But for our final closing segment, we were going to talk about our deals of the week. So that's something, politics or otherwise, that you just can't let go of, that you just like have been thinking about, that you just really want to tell listeners about. So I want to hear the real deal from both of us. Would you like to start, or you want me to kick us off, Denise?
You kick it off.
Okay. So mine this week is not politics related. It's actually Taylor Swift. Which, if you know me, I like her. I think she's cool. I think she's funny. I think she's talented. I think, but like I never quite understood the Swifties craze and like all of the stuff that she has around her. However, I was interested in learning a bit more about her because she went on her Instagram on like National Voting Day, and she posted a link to like a vote.org, which is a nonpartisan or bipartisan, however you want to look at it, site that just like helps people get registered. So it's not going to like log what party they voted for, but Taylor Swift has been pretty vocal about what side of the aisle she's standing on. And vote.org saw an explosion of new registrations, getting over 35,000 people to register to vote in one day, which is, I know like 35,000 doesn't maybe seem like a lot, but it is monumental, especially when you look at the amount of people that normally register to vote in a single day. So I thought that was really cool of her to do, that to use her platform like that. And it just shows what you can do if you have these kinds of platforms and why it's important to participate in the way that in these kinds of ways when you have such a platform. And then I learned more about her. You've probably heard that her and Travis Kelce have been hitting it off lately. She went to the game, sat with his mom. That was cool. And then I learned that she has sold over 200 million records globally, and she's one of the best-selling musicians of all time. Of all time. She is the most streamed female artist on Spotify and the only act to have 5 albums within the first week of sales to sell over 1 million copies in the United States. She has 12 number one albums, which is more than any woman in history. And she just hit the 12 like last month in September, and she unseated Barbara Streisand from the person who previously held that with 11. Barbara Streisand had 11 number one albums. So Taylor Swift just surpassed her. And she's tied for third with Drake for 12 albums. And she's only beat by Jay-Z, who has 14, and the Beatles, who have 19. And I was like, that's incredible. I mean, I don't know if I get it all the way. Like I said, like I like her. I think she's cool. I don't consider myself a Swiftie, but the more I learn about her, the more I'm just impressed by her. And so I thought that I would share that for my deal of the week.
Wow. That is impressive. I've been paying attention to that as well because there's been so much talk about her. Like, wow, where's all this coming from? But like you, the thing I've been taken away from that is her ability to impact voting. And so I'm glad to see that because maybe she can help get a lot of these younger people out next year.
And it really cracked me up because, like, it just shows kind of how Republicans are just in this bubble, just not at all in touch with the world. I guess, don't like Taylor Swift now, and they were calling her this is a quote, a gold digger for wanting to be with Travis Kelce, and she makes exponentially more
The
money
girl
than him.
got they are so dumb.
Because she went to his game, Travis Kelce moved up to be like the second or third most sold jersey in the entire NFL, more Google searches for his team and his name than ever before in one day, more followers in one day than he had like in total, I think. I think it was like 300,000 people that followed him on Instagram just because Taylor Swift went to his game. I mean, she may or may not be somewhat of a cult leader, but like I'm kind of here for this one.
Oh, no doubt about it. Well, mine may not necessarily be uh as upbeat as yours.
That's
Uh
okay.
it's still it's in this pop culture atmosphere though. I know you've been hearing about Tupac Shakur. Um and that they have finally got the man that killed Tupac,
Yeah.
almost 30 years ago. But what I'm taking from this is now who's being dragged into this has been an accomplice in Tupac's murder, which is Diddy. That he
It's
has
not funny, but
has something to do with this. And the thing is, just making this all so interesting right now is that I saw a video of Diddy yesterday pleading with people to pray for him. And I'm thinking, because I knew something had to be weird because recently he had been coming out like giving artists back their catalogs, right? Like, and I'm thinking, well, he's not so generous usually and so nice and doing that kind of his heart. Why is Diddy giving people their catalogs back? Because he was representing artists and promoting artists and things like that. And why is he giving them back? What's going on here? All I know is that there's some stuff that, you got this guy that's locked up. This guy is singing like 10 canaries all at one time. And he is calling out Diddy's name, like Diddy did this, Diddy did that. And Diddy is scared. He is freaking out. And
Mhm.
so this is the thing that I've been seeing quite a bit of. And so, but the thing really that's sticking with me is that there's a police officer who answered a call the night that Tupac got shot. And the police officer went to attend to Tupac. He said he was leaning against the door of the car. So the officer opened the door and he just kind of guided Tupac out of the car down onto the ground. And he was asking him who shot him. He said, because if a person who had been shot or whatever, as they lay dying, if they can tell you who did it, it's admissible in court. And he kept asking Tupac, who did this? And, Tupac, was bleeding very heavily, but Tupac looked up at him and said, F you. And that was his last words. So, that's what I've been kind of paying attention to. So I'm like, okay, that's a whole lot going on there,
Yeah.
that Diddy's hands was in this. But this guy who's running around, because somebody told this guy if he confesses and tell all this stuff and point out these other people that were involved, that he would get some sort of immunity. Somebody lied to him. Um, And and he's
Mhm.
locked up right now, so I'm pretty sure somebody gonna be hearing about him not breathing anymore pretty soon
Wow.
because he's talking a lot. So that's my thing that I'm bringing to the table on this segment right here. But that's the thing that came to my like, did he? You in trouble, my man?
Maybe not as upbeat, but just as relevant and just as important. And I'm really glad that you brought that up for us, Denise. I had heard like rumors, I guess, in like the rap sphere about Diddy being involved. I don't know if you followed the MGK Machine Gun Kelly fight diss like a few years ago.
Yeah, yeah, a little bit.
In in Eminem's diss response, he said, "But Kels, the day you put out a hit's the day Diddy admits that he put the hit out that got Pac killed."
Mm,
And then in the end of the song, he says, "I'm just kidding, Diddy. You know I love you."
see?
But here it is coming to fruition. So I'm
Yeah,
going to be following that now too. Thank
yeah,
you for bringing it
follow
to my
that.
attention.
Because it's actually been said too in some circles that Kim Porter, who was his children's mother, because she died a couple years
Ooh,
ago, it's being said too that they think that he may have had something to do with that. That's a rumor
wow.
that's also circulating, because she has some knowledge of something that she was threatening to tell in a tell-all book. So there's a lot there. So yeah, pay attention to that. But that thing of this guy is in prison, but he's singing a lot about Diddy. But I saw the video myself of Diddy nearly in tears and was kind of
Wow.
asking people to pray on his behalf, but he would never say what to pray for. And I'm like, um, what you put out in the atmosphere comes back to you one way or another, dude.
Yeah, and like uh, he Tupac was such a talent. Like I
Yes,
wish that we could have seen what he would have been able to
right,
accomplish if his life wasn't taken from him
right.
so young and cut so short. And again, just like I have some trouble finding sympathy for these Republicans,
That's right.
I'm having some trouble finding sympathy for Diddy. And
Absolutely.
if he's shocked and him and the guy who's been arrested already, if they're just shocked because they thought they were gonna get away from this forever, well, your comeuppance is here, buddy.
Well, the
And
guy is
karma,
saying that Diddy was offering him and his nephew $1 million to take Pac out. So I'm like, okay, this is what
right.
that's what he told.
And that's like kind of like the Trump case. Like obviously you murdered somebody. I mean, $1 million is a lot of money. I don't know what your situation was like. I'm never going to condone murder, but I think the person who ordered this hit, who offered the $1 million, uh, Diddy, Trump,
Yep.
um, are a lot more at fault than some other people may,
Uh-huh.
you know what I mean? Like,
Uh-huh.
okay, maybe you didn't get your hands dirty, but nobody's hands would have been dirty had you not stuck your fingers all up in it.
There you go. Absolutely. So, and I think he knows that if he does get arrested, it's not going to be good for him because there's some people in there waiting for him because he's been doing some dirty stuff over the years.
Mm.
So there's some folks waiting on him. So,
Newsflash, your money can't keep you out of prison forever. So
that's
let's
my
hope that
opinion.
idea follows suit into our politics.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, Denise. Well, it has been such a good conversation, and I'm
Yes.
looking forward to doing this again with you next week.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and to our listeners, this has been our Deals of the Week. Our
Yes.
new episodes drop roughly about once a week, and you can find us on social media and tune in wherever you get your listening at the real deal underscore pod. Again, that's the real deal underscore pod. And if you enjoyed our episode this week, please hit those like, share, follow buttons and stay updated with the real deal every week.